The Supreme Court giving 2 battleground states the green light to count absentee ballots after November 3rd. The decisions affect North Carolina and Pennsylvania, both which are pivotal in deciding who wins the White House. In Pennsylvania, mail-in ballots can be received by November 6th and still tallied, but the Supreme Court could consider a challenge from state Republicans after the election. In North Carolina, the deadline to count absentee ballots was pushed back to November 12th. Those ballots must be postmarked on or before Election Day. Justice Amy Coney Barrett, who joined the court Thursday, did not participate in either case. A spokesperson for the court said she did not have enough time to fully review the briefs. For more, let's bring in CBS News White House correspondent Weijia Jiang. All right, so you were probably listening in to our conversation there with Senator Coons, and we asked him about these Supreme Court decisions. Are they being seen within the White House as a setback for the Trump campaign?
Well, certainly not publicly, but the president himself will say, he has been saying that, these ballots should be counted on Election Day, full stop. But, because we are in this unprecedented time, because people are using mail-in ballots more than ever before, obviously it's complicated. And that's why, these states are battling it out, and why Republicans are urging the Supreme Court to step in, because even though we don't know how people vote, right, we'll never know the answer that they choose on the ballot, we know that more registered Democrats are voting by mail than Republicans. And so that could be a reason why they are trying to block some of those ballots from being counted. And so there is a lot of concern overall from the Trump campaign about just how many of those votes could help impact the election. At the same time, other advisors are saying they don't believe that Democrats will be able to make enough ground up with these mail-in ballots versus all the people they are expecting to turn out physically on Election Day. This is really what they are hoping for and banking on to, push President Trump to a second term, is all of his supporters coming out and voting in person.
So let's talk about these newly released recordings from President Trump's son-in-law and senior advisor, Jared Kushner. He is speaking to journalist Bob Woodward, part of the series of recordings that we heard, the president speaking to him that occurred in mid-April. And he says that the president was, quote, getting the country back from the doctors. He's talking about the COVID pandemic and how the administration is dealing with it. What else are we learning from that April 18th interview, and how is the White House responding?
So far, the White House has not formally responded, but, I know we talked about this earlier this morning, Anne-Marie. The fact is there's nothing really that's a bombshell in these recordings. It is startling to hear the words out loud, but we always understood what the administration's motive was, because the president has told us so many times, and he has openly contradicted medical advice. Because he wants to focus on the economy and focus on reopening, which is exactly what Jared Kushner talks about in these recordings, saying that, because of the need to reopen, because, I guess certain states were starting to ease back their guidelines and the federal mitigation measures were expiring, that the president was taking the country back from the doctors. And the wording is concerning because it sets up this us versus them mentality. In fact, Kushner even said they sort of came to a negotiated settlement. We're not negotiating here. I mean, we're talking about people's health, and you would assume that it would be the medical experts who were on the front lines of helping these administration leaders make critical policy decisions, not, a win or a lose for anybody. It should always be a win for the American people. And so these recordings do, create concern because, again, it just verifies, the president's thinking that the economy should always be the driving force in dealing with the pandemic. Now, that's not to say it's not a massive piece and something that, the country really is struggling with and people are struggling with. But at what price? We know that the president has said time and time again, the cure can't be worse than the disease. What does that really mean, especially now when we are seeing the numbers continue to spike in addition to hospitalizations and deaths?
You make an excellent point, Weijia. This notion that the coronavirus pandemic, which has now, as you know, killed more than 220,000 people and is killing up to 1,000 people a day, would be seen through the lens of politics and whether it's a win for the occupant of the Oval Office, as opposed to, well, how can we best work together with medical professionals, with the doctors on our own coronavirus task force to ensure that we keep those numbers down. The White House, Weijia, is also now working, you pointed to the word clarity, is working to clarify a press release claiming that the president ended the coronavirus pandemic. I know this is from the science office of the White House, but it's almost as if they think that people, reporters and others, are sort of not going to see this, or not going to catch it, but the president's supporters will see it and then repeat that as the truth. What are they saying is the intent behind the press release, and have they amended it?
Well, they have to clean it up, right? And in fact, that's what they spent the day doing yesterday when this press release came out and in big, bold letters stated that one of the president's achievements with regard to science was ending the COVID-19 pandemic, which we know is not true. And so White House officials had to come out and say, actually, what he meant was that is a goal. That is his top goal, is ending the pandemic. But the problem is sometimes the president has talked about the pandemic himself in the past tense. And he has talked about the job that he has done, how well he has done, and that we are turning a corner. And even that has required some clarity and cleanup, because his chief of staff, other officials have said, well, what he really means is that we're turning a corner because there are therapeutics and there are vaccines and there are ways to get a handle of this. But when you hear President Trump talk about it, it seems like he's saying that the end of the pandemic is near. Those are two very different things. And so, it could have been a poor word choice, which is how the White House is describing it. It could have been meant to mislead. Who knows the real motive? But what we know today is that they insist that they actually meant that it was just a goal that they're striving for.
Weijia, you can call it poor word choice, but when you repeat it over and over again, like the president does when he talks about turning the corner on the pandemic, then how many times can you say, oopsie, just a poor word choice? I think maybe for the administration it's a poor word choice, but for the president, his words are pretty deliberate. Weijia Jiang, thank you so much.
Sure, thank you.